Device News Tonight.
Hey, yo, Noisy.
Okay, newbie, we've only got a few minutes and a lot to cover, so listen up.
I'm Ramin Dravidi, composer of Game of Thrones.
Snow diggity. I like the music. Snow diggity. You got to be. No? Are you not?
Join me on a journey where getting lost is the only true destination.
What have you done?
What do all these well-known brands have in common? Each one of them is amazing, actually using the power of sound in terms of engaging their audiences. So the new normal that we've been talking about today is wired for sound. We all have a speaker in our pocket we carry with us all the time, and research actually tells us that 60% of us have the volume on our phone in any given point. So we can't just start blurting out sound across people's phones, but if people are brand fans, if they opt in, they actually love the distraction and love the interruption through the day. Sound is the untapped secret to really maximize your brand story. It's quick, it's emotional, it's memorable, and human. And there's never been a time in the creative industry when we've had so many free and inexpensive resources to be able to accomplish this. So we all know about more familiar ways of communicating. Word of mouth being a very quick way to communicate. Print being very emotional. Commercials being memorable. And live taping certainly being very personal, human, and fan-centric. Well, in the new age of media, obviously, we still have these same human needs that we need to be filled by these new media. So quick is now Snapchat. Other media are emotional, memorable, human, and fan-centric. It's just being done in a different way. And each one of these media is actually wired for sound, although most of us maybe are not utilizing that opportunity. I wrote a book about sound, actually the role of sound in our lives, not necessarily specifically just about marketing. In my book, The Sonic Boom, How Sound Transforms the Way We Think, Feel, and Buy, and you will all have opportunities to win free copies later, by the way, in this talk if you're paying attention. In the book, basically, I talk about how we are, each of us, wired for sound as human beings. Whether or not we realize it, every single moment of our lives is scored by music and sound. It's always there, making emotional connections, essentially guiding our choices, and actually changing our mood in an instant. So companies like Apple know this, okay? Let me play for you the 1984 startup sound for the Mac. Let me play it for you again. It goes by very quickly. Sounds like two guys got together and made a computer in a garage, right? Here's what the modern Mac sounds like. It's like a religion. Amazing things are going to happen. Think about the complexity of the emotional story you just got in 2 seconds and how iconic that sound is for Apple. Now, strangely enough, in the new MacBook Pros that are coming out, reportedly this sound will be missing. Huge mistake for Apple. They're thinking, oh, it's like an iPad now, it's moving quicker. But what they're missing is the emotional component that people have, the emotional connection that they have to their product. How that sound carries them from one generation of the product to the next, to the next, to the next. How the unboxing experience. On YouTube, there are 1.4 million unboxing videos for new electronic products, which represent 1.8 billion views. Think about Apple's benefit in terms of the sound of that device in those unboxing videos when people power up a new machine. They're going to miss that. I'm going to make a prediction. Within the next year, Apple's going to restore that sound. So here's your first opportunity to win a free book, in case you're interested. What brand sound is most unforgettable to you? So tweet at me, at Joel Beckerman, at PromaxUK, hashtag the new normal. Think about a product, a service, a TV brand, any kind of brand, a sound associated with the product. Which ones are most unforgettable for you? By the way, I also want to apologize to everyone in advance, because once we start talking about this stuff, once you leave here today, you're going to be thinking about this all the time. One of the things that's kind of crazy about sound is it operates mostly on the subconscious level. And when you start making these things conscious, you actually start noticing them everywhere. So how does sound work? Okay? The world has changed dramatically. We used to be a communication-focused world. Now we're an experience-focused world. In a communication-focused world, visuals really dominate. They're static by themselves. Visuals by themselves are static, passive, one-way experiences, where sonic is really being experience-focused. It's visceral, it's interactive, and most of all, it's efficient. There's no way, as you just heard with the Apple sound, there's no way to tell a quicker emotional story, make an emotional impact with people than sound. And especially as people's attention spans get shorter and shorter, and more media are requiring us to make an impact in a very, very short space of time, nothing connects to people emotionally quicker than sound. Let me talk about meaning, okay? We're all aware of visual semiotics, things like thumbs up and green light means go, and colors that represent brands. These are things that we're all, that are intuitive to us and familiar, and the semiotics are their little shortcuts. They're cognitive shortcuts. They're ways that we get through our world using less and less brain power. Well, guess what? Music and sound have semiotics as well. Strings generally lead us to think about things that are expansive or romantic or very warm. Trumpets and horns make us think more about things that are powerful or exciting or heroic. Electronic music or drums tend to feel more moving forward or more propulsive. We have all these semiotics associated with sound. We just have to think about them as creators. How can we apply these things to sort of create the messages that we're looking to create and be able to support our creative work? Really interesting to note that actually out of all of our senses, we respond to sound quicker than any other sense, even touch. So think about the ramifications of that. Because of that, sound is the organizer of all of our other senses in multisensory experiences. You actually hear a promo or a television show or hear a Snapchat story before you actually respond to the visuals of it. So we have to think about how sound actually guides us through those explorations. So I want to talk to you about 4 different takeaways today. Hopefully 4 things that you can take with you tomorrow to use to amplify your work and amplify the emotional connection you make to your audiences and the emotionality of the messages and the connections that you're making. So first of all, speed. Sound, again, efficiently engages audiences in under 10 seconds. We showed you the Apple one. You can actually do it in 2. You need to make every second matter in this day and age in terms of social media. So you saw a little bit of this in the opening. It's the Doctor Who story. Visuals are stunning, but without the sound, there's not much of a story, or it's a little difficult to sort of understand the story. But of course, they didn't present it to the public without the sound. So brilliantly, what happened at the very beginning, there was a little piano note, if you notice. It grabbed your attention, and it sort of helped rocket you and propel you through this story, which is only 10 seconds long. But it's amazing how complex and how rich that story is, and certainly was incredibly successful for BBC in terms of driving interest and tune-in. So another important thing to note. Brands with music and sound that fit their brand identity are 96% more likely to be recalled than those with non-fit music or no music at all. And this is here, two scientists at Leicester University. it's amazing to me sometimes how, as creative people, we may get hypnotized by a cool pop song or something that feels trendy, but that's not what people respond to. They may love the song, but they won't pay attention to your message. What they will pay attention to is when the music and sound and association with your message are in sync. That is the critical factor. Also important to note is, gone are the days, we've been talking about this all day, gone are the days where we're just solely making emotional choices in terms of, as creative people, in terms of what music and sound we want to put in our creative. There are verifiable ways to be able to test and research these things. And just so you know, and a lot of work we do and others do now, you can show essentially how music and sound will transform somebody's opinion of a brand, even provide a tick up in purchase intent. These are verifiable, that emotion sells, we know this, when it's done properly, and that actually more than just being emotion, that you can actually calibrate what emotions you're triggering. And these things are super important, especially when you're putting so much time and effort and energy and resource into creating campaigns. You want to make sure that you're making the emotional connection that you're looking to make. So there are ways now in research, in online quant in this particular case, where these things can be done quite reliably. Number 2 takeaway I'm hoping you'll take with you today is sound must be memorable. Okay? There is so much wonderful, amazing stock library music that you probably have available to you right now, or inexpensive or free solutions around sound effects and sound design. But being memorable is incredibly important in terms of actually being impactful. Otherwise, sound and music then becomes what we call sonic trash. It becomes noise. It distracts from the message rather than adding to it. Here's an example where GE created a podcast called Panoply, which was amazingly successful for them. As a branded product, essentially became the #1 podcast in iTunes, again, because it's instantly recognizable.
What do you hear? Listen close with me. Is that a voice? Is it more than one voice? Are they speaking? Singing?
Podcasts are incredibly successful now in the world. Thinking about what's happening in culture, again, remember we were talking about experience-focused? Sound is experience-focused. Podcasts are experience-focused. That's what audiences are thriving and craving, and it works just as well with visuals. The next thing I want to take with you, or want you to take with you, is thinking that music and sound has to be emotional. It has to trigger some kind of emotion. Again, if it's generic, if it's just a drum beat that pushes a spot along, it may make the visuals seem more appealing or something, but it's not really going to connect to your audiences. So think about sound and music as a litmus test is it must add emotion to the message, the right emotion. So it's about igniting this meaningful connection that matters between your audience and your brand. Enrich all content with the same emotional punch. Really, that's what it's about. That's what it's about in terms of getting chameleon consumers who have a million choices to be paying attention to you. O2 did an amazing job here in this animated content for their Wear the Rose campaign.
Make them giants. Wear the rose.
Amazing concept, incredibly well executed, perfect fit of the music and sound to deliver that specific creative idea in such a simple and elegant way. Fandoms. There's so much we all can learn from fandoms. All of our brands really need to become fandoms. So fandoms, essentially it's about cultivating a community through consumer and brand-generated buzz. And you cannot imagine or think about a fandom that doesn't have some musical or sonic ownable component. So Game of Thrones became certainly a fandom for many reasons than just the sound. But the sound and the music was really an integral component in terms of what made them, first of all, helped make them successful, but then made them shareable, and also made them copyable, and also made them user-generated.
I have some lyrics that I think would go wonderfully with the Game of Thrones theme song.
There's Arya, then there's Sansa, then there's Theon, then there's...
Wiener, 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 wiener,
Leveraging the power of sound in the new normal. So this is a little reminder slide here, okay? Number one, please take with you the idea that speed is important. Remember the BBC piece. That tiny little setup at the beginning helped pull you into the story. You can engage with audiences in 10 seconds or 2 seconds. Memorability, you need to tell an instantly recognizable brand story. Sound and music can do that in a way that nothing else can in terms of being something that's incredibly brief and taking not much time. Emotional. Music and sound has to be used to heighten emotion. Music and sound equals emotion. Fandoms. Cultivate a community through consumer and brand-generated buzz. Hopefully these things are useful for you as you move forward. And I imagine if you think about them, and this is one of the funny things about music and sound, a lot of times we don't think about music and sound because it operates at this subconscious level. But as creators, the impetus is for us to make sure we're considering all these components, especially in this audience engagement realm where we're trying to make emotional connections. Last thing I want to share with you is sort of the next place we're going. We've all been talking about VR, we've all been talking about AR overlay and AR by itself. And I'm proud to say, actually, we're working a lot in this area, as are others, but there really is no great VR experience without great audio. And why is that? There's no camera moves. There are no cuts. There are no dissolves. Other than dialogue, how can you drive narrative experience from point to point to point? And the answer is right now, sound is a vital component to that. And actually, the next wave, most of the VR experiences you're going to see these days don't have this, but the new wave now is positional audio. So think about it for a second. If I'm listening in a VR experience and I turn my head and the whole sound field moves with me, what have I told my brain? I'm listening to headphones. If I'm surprised in back of me and I flip my head around and the soundtrack stays where it is, now what's happened is the sound completes the experience of, and really the illusion of me being somewhere else. So positional audio is a vital, vital part of VR, and actually not just in terms of overall experience, but actually in terms of driving narrative focus. Just want to share a few seconds of a music video here. This is actually the first spatialized audio music video. We happen to work on this with the artist Dawn Richards. Was released at E3 this year, and then she sort of rocketed to become the top iTunes artist for the week that this was released. You can just lower the music and sound just a little bit so I could talk over it. You'll notice, and again, I can't provide the VR experience for you, but you're seeing sort of about 270 degrees to the 360 degrees. And as each of these items comes up, there's positional sound that draws your attention to it, so that there's a narrative story that's being told. If we were watching more of it, you would see band members show up, and you can hear the addition of those parts, and that drives you to look in this 360 realm and not just stare forward or just sort of wander about aimlessly. And from our experience, the only way we're going to get people to engage longer with VR experiences, not 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but a half hour or an hour, is if we're driving narrative attention and we're thinking about these things as stories and people become invested in them as stories. Another opportunity for a free book if you're interested. What sounds, and again, this is really honestly, guys, about trying to keep the conversation going. I'd love to keep the conversation going beyond this talk. What sound triggers memories of your childhood? or maybe your young adulthood, thinking about a prom or a song for a prom, or maybe a song that reminds you of your summers that you spent somewhere. Think about those sounds that when you hear that sound, immediately you're transported across time and space, and it's as if you're there right now. Sound has that potential, and sound has that possibility for us. Again, if you tweet at Joel Beckerman, at PromaxUK, hashtag the new normal, we'll be giving away, I think, 20 books for the first one and 20 books for this one for anybody who's interested. I want to leave you with one last thing, which was a project we were very fortunate to work with, and the reason I brought it forward is that I think it covers all 4 of those points that we had discussed and made. We were fortunate enough to work with the brand IMAX, and we created an anthem for them. What an anthem is a long-form story that tells the entirety of that brand story. So you think about IMAX, you think about superhero movies, but you also think about museum films, and you think about education that they bring in filmmakers, and it's a very deep brand with many, many things that they provide. So we had to create a piece of music that told that whole story, and then they provided clips, which they then put against that music. You'll see a little bit of the IMAX story here, and they're using this in social, and they're using this in launching new films, and they're using variations. There's about, I think, 100 tracks of music and sound that came for this. Again, them telling their brand story. But you'll notice there's one little sound that will tie the whole thing together, which you'll hear. And this is, again, hopefully demonstrates some of the things we've been talking about.
We call these trees Utraya Mokri.
Please remember about the power of sound to make an emotional connection in an instant. Thank you so much.